A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We are talking about UFOs and aliens. Millions of people claim to have seen UFOs, and many even recall personal encounters with strange entities. The popular view is that these are advanced aliens visiting us from far away. But what does the Bible say? Are there any biblical accounts of aliens or UFOs? Did people in ancient times have similar sightings and encounters that are claimed by so many today? Well, today we seek to solve one of the most haunting and persistent mysteries of our time by addressing UFO sightings in every country, things seen on radar, what happened at Roswell, alien abductions, government cover-ups, and even a new religion. And the truth will surprise you. Well, Gary Bates is our special guest today. He has worked with Creation Ministries for more than 30 years and established that ministry in the US and remained there for 14 years. He's also authored Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection, and he joins us in the Vision Studios today. Gary Bates, welcome.
Andrew, thank you. Good to be here again.
Gary, what a hot topic this is, UFOs and aliens. Now, I've got to ask you, for our listeners that don't know, what happened at Roswell, just briefly?
Well, what happened at Roswell was a government cover-up. There you go. That'll say, oh, no, he's thinking about aliens. Let's think about the time. 1947, we had no satellites. So if you wanted to listen to radio broadcasts or transmissions on the other side of the Earth, you're unable to do so. And so, obviously, Americans had dropped the bomb at the end of the Second World War, and the Soviets were developing nuclear technology, nuclear weapons. So in an effort to try to eavesdrop on what the Soviets were doing, the American military had these weather balloons, large weather balloons, basically covered in a silvery kind of refractive envelope-type material, the idea that they were thinking it might reflect radar or something like that. And underneath them were acoustic listening devices. And the idea was when they put them in the atmosphere, they'd be carried by the jet streams over Soviet airspace. And of course, from America, then they could listen to the signals coming from the atmosphere that were listening to the Soviet nuclear tests. Now, when one crashed in Roswell, the government didn't want anyone, particularly the Soviets, to know what they were doing. So they were hush-hush about it, and then that created the idea that there was something to cover up, and maybe it was alien technology, etc. In fact, the Roswell Daily Record is what started off. That was the local newspaper. The front page said, "Flying saucer crashed in Roswell." And the reason it said that is earlier that year, 1947, a businessman called Kenneth Arnold was flying his light plane over Mount Rainier in Washington, and he said he saw 9 shaped discs buzz his aircraft. He came down, reported to the press. It was an absolute sensation, and that's the genesis of the term flying saucer.
Okay.
So when something crashed at Roswell, capping onto the hysteria of earlier that year, that's what caused that whole incident to blow up. But under the Freedom of Information Act now, Andrew, we actually know what happened at Roswell. So all those records have been released about what they were doing.
Okay, so Roswell is obviously in the States. So in a nutshell, what happened at Roswell? What has the Freedom of Information, access to the information given us?
Well, it showed those weather balloons, basically. That's what they found. But the guy that found it, or not found it, it actually crashed on a guy called Mac Brazel's farm. And then a military officer by the name of Jesse Marcel was already a UFO believer. And he was the one that retrieved the record. And he said, look at this. We've never seen anything like this. Well, of course, he didn't even know what his own military were doing. And so when he was interviewed by the press, he was convinced he'd found alien wreckage. And here's the thing I found in nearly 30 years investigating this, Andrew, is the truth is much simpler and much more benign than most people realize. So when you think about all the hype about Roswell, the movies, the TV series, and we're talking about a crashed weather balloon, no, it can't be that simple. It can't be that simple. But actually it is. And, you know, I've preached in Roswell, In fact, I think it was 2009. I think to this day I'm the only Bible-believing creationist ever to feature and speak at the annual Roswell UFO Festival because of the success of the book that I wrote.
Where is Roswell in the States geographically?
It's in New Mexico, and quite interesting. It's a town that's used. The airport there is used as one of those airport graveyards or airport storage. So, like during COVID, when people were not flying, the airlines store their planes there. So when you fly in, it's quite interesting. In the middle of the desert, really in the middle of nowhere, and you see hundreds and hundreds of planes at the airport, giving the idea it's busy. But the first time we ever flew in there, we came off the air bridge and walked in, and there was a life-size cutout of a grey alien cardboard cutout waiting for us at the airport. There's a museum there. It's not huge. It has some interesting stuff, but they have a map on the wall, and they clear the map every month, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of pins from people from Europe, from Australia, from all over the world visiting Roswell. And I have to say, you mentioned it's become a substitute religion. It has. They go there looking for meaning and purpose. Often when I talk on creation, I say everybody at some stage in their life has to answer those three big questions. What we're talking about, where do we come from? Why am I here? What's our meaning and purpose to life? And then the third one is what happens to us when we die. So if evolution was true, okay, you and I are the product of chance, random processes, a Big Bang 14 billion years ago, and ultimately there's no meaning and purpose. And what happens when you die? Well, nothing. There's no creator, no God to be accountable. They put you in the ground and burn you up. But if God is creator, then you and I were created with meaning and purpose. And the decisions we make in this life, well, they're going to affect where we spend eternity. Now, the reason I go through that, if you think about it, the questions or the answers to questions 2 and 3 will always be determined by what you think about question 1. Are we created or are we evolved? That's the key issue everybody has to think about. Now, when you think about the alien subject, a lot of these alleged contactees receive messages and they hear things like, the aliens are our creators. We've been overseeing human evolution. They even have their own eschatology or their own end times. Books have been written. So some of it says that the fuddy-duddy Christians are going to get taken off the earth. But don't worry, we'll be okay to allow Mother Earth to evolve into her next stage of ascendancy, very new agey type stuff. So, they've got their own creation story. They've got their own end time story. So for some, it's become a substitute religion. In fact, in the movie version of my book, we showed there some quotes by a German sociologist, and he says ufology, which is what it's called, has in fact become a substitute religion. That was his conclusion.
Amazing. Don't you love how the Americans commercialize everything? How Roswell has become this commercial hub of alien information, and people go there on a pilgrimage, and obviously the town benefits from it financially because all the people going there.
Yeah, we've been there a few times. If you watched the Mardi Gras during the annual Roswell Festival week, it's bizarre. It's almost a mini version of the Rio Carnival. People dress up in their alien gear, but the major businesses in town. I mean, we're talking about multi-international corporations like Toyota will have a float with aliens all over it. In the movie, I've got some footage. You see me standing outside the local Toyota dealership, and there's a 20-foot high green inflatable alien at the entrance to the car dealership. The McDonald's there is built in the shape of a flying saucer. But we're not talking about a huge city. It's really a town, and it survives now on this alien reputation.
Well, I bet it does. I mean, that balloon crashing there was the best thing that's ever happened to the town by the sounds of things. Yeah. But Gary, I want to ask you, how many people do you think worldwide claim to have seen UFOs or aliens now? What are the stats?
Well, I quoted a poll that was done in 1998. It's called the Roper poll. So back in 1998, just in America, it claimed that 20 million people had seen a UFO and 4 million had been abducted by aliens.
4 million?
4 million in the US.
So 4 million Americans claim to have been abducted by an alien?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
It is. So here's the thing. In my experience, though, So even when I'm talking on this subject in churches, like I'm in the States and they've got a billboard outside, imagine that on a church billboard. Gary Bates, UFOs, aliens, and the Bibles tonight. But generally, Andrew, when I'm standing at the pulpit, I can see people who've come in who are searching. They'll often won't sit with, the major groups. They could be out there on their own, might be a single person or a couple of guys or something like that. And they'll often come up to me at the end and share their experiences. So these experiencers are usually in a little deeper. They'll often have not even told people because, let's be frank, if you think a little grey alien stood in your bed, interfered with you during the night, it's not exactly something you could go to the office tomorrow and, talk around a water cooler about. But then, even in churches, and I know it's going to happen here, Christians, because we are just part of the population, and sometimes sightings are seen by hundreds and hundreds of people. I'm now talking about objects that appear in the sky. Christians get caught up in that. So we can see things that are manifesting. The question is for everybody is, what are we looking at? So when people say they've seen a UFO, well over 90%, this has been documented now for over 60 years. There are organisations that go out and investigate sightings, and most often they can say, well, you were looking at an aircraft, it was the lights, or you were looking at the International Space Station that went overhead. We get things like lenticular clouds that are saucer-shaped, ball lightning that appears. So lay people, respectfully, don't know what they're looking at, but when you say UFO, it doesn't kind of mean unidentified flying object anymore in the common vernacular, does it? When you say UFO, we really mean a spaceship piloted by beings from another planet.
There's an alien driving for sure, yeah.
So it's very, very hard to unpack. I mean, I've literally had, I lose count. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but it's just hundreds and hundreds of people contact me. In fact, I got one this week. I got an email from the office in the US. A guy says, I want to talk to Gary Bates about a sighting his mother had when she was a child. This happens all the time to me. I can't tell you what you saw when you're a child. And I often say to people, and it's not a plug, but get the book, because it is very, very comprehensive in terms of looking at the nature of what people saw, how they manifest or how they can manifest, whether it was likely to be benign or not. Now, how do we tell the difference? So if somebody just saw some lights, an investigator will go out from MUFON, Mutual UFO Network in the US, and he'll even look at the local military base and say, did you have any craft or something like that? But there's a very, very small percentage, Andrew, that defy what we would call naturalistic interpretations. So if you're looking at something that's seen on radar and it's traveling at 2,000 miles per hour, well, we don't have craft that can do that, particularly when they stop in their tracks or they do right-angle turns without slowing down. I have testimony of a man in my book. He and his brother saw them accelerate to the ground and go back up without slowing down. Now, if there were occupants on board, you would be smashed because of G-forces. We've seen them appear and disappear from radar. So 1 minute they're on radar and they've suddenly vanished. Fighter pilots have looked at them, or aircraft pilots rather, not necessarily fighter pilots, have seen them. So we're talking about two guys in the cockpit see it, and it suddenly disappears from view. So here's the other thing. We never see them enter our atmosphere from outside. So these are the ones that defy naturalistic explanations I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We don't see them coming from, in our solar system, traveling towards us. They appear, they disappear. So even the secular ufologists say that they seem to be already part of our environment or our existence, but are possibly emanating in another realm.
Wow. So they're among us. Some people believe the aliens are actually among us right now. Gary, I want to just hold it there and remind our listeners that you have written this book called Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. And this book was actually turned into a movie, which was a very popular movie. And we've got 2 copies to give away today to listeners. And if you call today, with the most interesting question, or as Gary Bates would describe it or define it, as the most insightful question, you will get a free copy of this book, Alien Intrusion. We'll send it out to you. And we're going to open up the talkback lines now. Do you believe in UFOs? Do you believe in aliens? Have you had an encounter or an experience with a UFO or an alien? We want to hear your stories. And the most insightful question to Gary today, and the most interesting story to Gary and myself today, you will get a free copy of this book. It's called Alien Intrusion, and it's the Evolution Connection. You can call us now on 1-800-316-316. That's 1-800-316-316. We'll take a short break and be back with your calls after this.
The Treasury Project is a community initiative designed to help us memorize Scripture together, one verse at a time. Each week, we focus on a new Bible verse, encouraging you to hide God's Word in your heart. Find memorization tips, devotional thoughts, and downloadable resources at treasuryproject.org.au. While you're there, sign up to receive the weekly verse by email or text. You can also easily find this week's scripture in the Bible tab of the Vision app. The Treasury Project. Another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
From the Kendrick brothers, the creators of War Room.
Miss Clara! It's hard for a woman to call out the man and her son. I just need some prayer support.
We pray that the Lord will open Isaiah's eyes so that he could see himself the way that the Lord sees him.
What kind of man do you want to be? Isaiah, welcome to The Forge.
The Forge, in cinemas now. Rated PG. For locations, go to faithmedia.com.au. Station sponsor.
Helping you make sense of life, culture, and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Welcome back, and we are making sense of life and the universe today. We are talking about UFOs and aliens, and we're asking you to call us. Do you believe in UFOs or aliens? Have you had an encounter? Perhaps a close encounter of the third kind, as the old movie was titled. We want to hear from you on 1-800-316-316. And the talk lines are lighting up, Gary. And we've also said we have 2 copies of his book to give away. One for the most insightful question or comment today, and one for the most interesting question or comment today. And our first caller was Graham from Bruny Island. Graham, are you there?
Yes, Andrew.
You got a question or a comment for Gary today?
I was wondering if he's heard of the Westall incident in Melbourne in 1996, where 200 witnesses cited UFOs landing near the school.
No, actually, I'm not familiar with that one. Perhaps you could just share a little bit more about it. You say they saw them land. That's a little bit irregular to normal sightings. Can you confirm that at all?
Yep. It landed in the field next to one of the schools, and there were 200 students and teachers there as witnesses, and had marks on the ground. An Air Force representative and the Australian police came and investigated it and told the students and the teachers not to mention anything about it. One teacher photographed it with a film camera, and they confiscated the film.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me. It sounds very similar to one that happened in Africa that actually landed and left marks on the ground. And these have been seen to leave impressions on the ground. Interestingly, Andrew mentioned Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Just like the movie, they have been seen to affect our environment. Sometimes the lights have gone out, those types of things. So, yes, that is common, that people see them, they affect our environment. We can talk more about that because often people want to, they ask, well, surely the government must know. But the reality is I don't think they do know because they've never been able to capture anything. They've never recovered any alien bodies or anything like that. And as we'll talk as we go on, I believe we're dealing with something supernatural. And, of course, the government doesn't believe in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
So they're unable to explain something that can manifest from another dimension into ours and then suddenly disappear again. But that's interesting. I've learned something today, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, my school friend was killed as a result of the landing of one of them further away from the actual school.
Yeah. Well, that would make news if that was the case.
Well, Graham, Thank you so much for calling today. That's actually an interesting call. And make sure you leave your details, all the callers, leave your details with our producer Mandy today, because we want to get in touch with you if you are the lucky winner of the book today. We've got 2 books to give away: Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection, authored by Gary Bates. But Graham, I want to thank you for calling 2020 today.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Gary.
And we got another caller, and it's Marlene from Renmac North. Are you there, Marlene?
It's Renmark, yes. One night I took my binoculars out. I bought a new pair of binoculars, and I thought, well, I'll go and see what I can see about the stars. So I took them outside, and whilst I was out seeing what I could see about the stars, I came across these really interesting things which were zooming around in the sky, dropping and rising and zooming around. And after watching them for a little while, I thought, it looks like some either country or whatever is actually writing in the sky, writing messages in the sky with either Chinese or Hebrew or something, letters, because no thing that we know of in this realm or whatever can travel at that speed. And I watched it for a while, and it was like it was writing letters, not a letter as in a letter, but the letter in that you see on paper of other languages, letters. And these things moved so fast that nothing, no aeroplane or anything like that could travel at that pace. So I don't know if anybody else has seen anything like that, but it went on for maybe 5 to 7 minutes, something like that, and then it all just disappeared.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience. As I said earlier, it's always hard, many years later, to try to tell people exactly what they saw. It's very common that we want closure on the event because obviously we'd like to know what it is we saw. The aim of UFO investigators, and including myself, and it's not to debunk or demean or detract from people's sightings or their experiences, but the first thing they'll always try to do, whether you're a Christian believer or a non-Christian believer, is they'll try to come up with a natural explanation. And as I said, sometimes the things that we see are more benign. For example, we've had flocks of birds with the moonlight shimmering on them, and flocks of birds often fly erratically. They fly up, down, left, right. But we're seeing the. Oh no, I'm not suggesting this was the case for yourself. Yeah, I'm not suggesting this was exactly what happened. But as I said, it's impossible. I think the thing that was different you mentioned there is you said they flew at some fantastic speed. So that would kind of defy or rule out those types of naturalistic explanations.
And it was doing like letters in the sky, and then it would stop, and it would stand still, and then it would take off again, and zoom all over the place, and then stop, and then zoom around like it was writing in the sky, like it writing a message in the sky.
Fascinating. And again, this just shows the realm and the gamut of how strange these things can be. And you could imagine if you're a serious investigator and you're posed with something like that, compared to the experience we just heard about before, it's very, very hard to bracket them and define them and put them into groups, but that's the nature of them.
There's definitely something else out there that's not behaving the way that we know that vehicles and craft can behave.
Yep.
Certainly. And Marlene, where is Renmac North? Whereabouts in Australia are you?
Renmac North is about 250 kilometres between Adelaide and 160 away from Mildura. So they're our 2 closest cities.
Murray River country.
Yes.
I've been there.
There you go. Well, Marlene, we want to thank you so much for calling us on 2020 today, and make sure you've left your details there with Mandy, and you're in the running to win a free copy of this book, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. 2 lucky callers are going to win a copy of this book today for the most interesting call and also the most insightful call, as judged by Gary Bates in the studio today. And we're still taking calls on 1-800-316-316. Gary, before we take another call, It sounds like most of these sightings are in America. Is that a fair statement?
No, not at all. In fact, sightings, what we'd call UFO sightings, and of course in America the military have now renamed them UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, or anomalous phenomena. The issue is, and I was just explaining there, that when you see things that defy naturalistic explanations, when I say naturalistic, we're either, the flocks of birds answer, or craft. In the movie we showed in 1998 Washington Press Club conference, where 80 Air Force officers spoke up about, and these are just not enlisted personnel, and gave testimony about seeing these things on radar, as I said, travelling at thousands of miles an hour, even descending, balls of light descending into missile silos and affecting the capability of America's nuclear weapons. And that's something I never ever spoke about, because for years people would think, well, Gary's off with the fairies, that's too extreme. But in the last couple of years, former Senator Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader of the House under the Obama administration, has actually come out and openly admitted that, and said that these UAPs have even affected America's nuclear missiles to an extent that the president wouldn't even been able to launch a first strike or even a retaliatory strike. So this is extremely serious.
That is serious.
Yeah. So now they're admitting the information, but just last week they released that after 70-something years and 4 projects and even recent investigations, they're seeing nothing of alien origin. And this is what we need to point out, Andrew. When I first started researching this, there was something called the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH. And this is what we kind of see in sci-fi movies. People traveling in their faster-than-light spaceships at warp drive or hyperspace and visiting other planets. And those aliens look different because the belief is that in a Big Bang universe, life evolved differently to here on Earth. Now, those aliens may be 1 million or billion years advanced on the evolutionary scale. That's how they can develop such technologies. But with everything now we do know, so even saying this as a Christian researcher, a non-Christian researcher, we would agree about the nature of the phenomenon, and that is, it is not coming to us from a galaxy far, far away. So they've moved into something called the interdimensional hypothesis, and they're getting closer to the truth, and that is that they're saying whatever it is that is visiting us, it's visiting us from another realm or dimension. And bingo, what has the Bible always said? The Bible has always said there is another realm or dimension. We might call it the spiritual realm or the supernatural realm. Secular researchers use terms like paranormal, paraphysical. We would say spiritual to describe the same thing. And what's interesting, if these really, really are advanced aliens even coming to from another dimension, why do they play cat and mouse? Why don't they reveal their true origins? So even the secular researchers now are saying that they believe it's actually something more sinister than something extraterrestrial, as in, aliens or something like that.
Gary Bates, I want to welcome you back to the studio here at Vision.
Thank you. You can see it's sparked some interest. It's welcome to my world.
And it's good. I'm really enjoying this. And Trevor from Toowoomba has been very patient. And Trevor, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Go for it, Trevor. This is your moment.
It's not about me. It's about a friend of mine that saw a UFO years ago, and he was driving the tractor in Gundawindi. And I think that was the beginning of his mental illness. And, it just followed him, And even me, I was sceptical. Oh, yeah, sure, mate, But he died last year. Mental illness, probably the reason behind it all. And it's just sad to see how the world judges people in these areas. I don't know. It's not about me. It's about my friend,
Yeah.
How the world,
Very, very sad to hear that, but I think what you've said there is probably pretty insightful. There's a couple of layers to that. I believe we're talking about something spiritual, particularly when we talk about people who claim abductions or have first-hand encounters, but even a small percentage of those sightings. And what happens is because people do not get closure, And the experience can be isolating. So sometimes they've seen it. As I said, they can't talk to anybody. They internalize it, and it bothers them. And because they don't get closure, yes, it can, deeply affect their psyche and their well-being. The second aspect is that, particularly in the area of abductions, researchers have shown that they tend to look for an entry point that somebody has. So we're talking about people that may have, say, unresolved trauma in their lives, abuse, or they could just be deep believers that aliens are visiting us, or have been for, thousands of years. Sometimes it could be drugs, alcoholism, all sorts of areas. And this is something that I discovered in meeting hundreds and hundreds of these experiences. And then lo and behold, I found when I started to go out into the UFO community that secular researchers had found the same thing. And one of the other interesting things is it seems to be generational. So often I would meet people and I'd say, has anybody else in your family had this experience that you know of? And then you'd find out it could be the father or the grandfather or even an uncle. And so it seems to be generational. And so what we're talking about is a form of victimization in some respects. And of course, kicking somebody down in the gutter, well, that seems to befit a character that we read in the Bible as well.
Yeah. So, we found our place we're going. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Yeah, I had personal experience through somebody, and it's really sad to see how they'll be written off by everybody,
Yeah, well, Trevor, number one, like Gary said, just really sorry for your loss of your friend there. It's just sad, really sad you lost your friend there, and I want to thank you for calling up, based on his experiences as well, and hopefully we'll hear from you again on 2020. Okay.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Good on you, Trevor. That was Trevor from Toowoomba, and we've got another very, very patient caller, and it's Tara. Tara, are you there?
Yeah, still here.
Where are you calling in from again, Tara? Tell us where you're from.
Yep, Mount Barker in Western Australia.
Mount Barker, WA.
I lived there in a former life. My wife and I, when we first got married, I used to manage the Mount Barker Co-op.
Oh, lovely. Still going.
So what's your experience, Tara?
Yeah, probably not so much an experience, but definitely. So I'm an Aboriginal Australian, and we have our own cultural beliefs. Whether it's spiritual or supernatural, and Dreamtime stories where.
And we seem to have lost Tara. Tara, if you want to call us back, something weird happened then, but you're welcome to call us back. But we do have another caller waiting in the wings, and it's Maria, and Maria is calling from Albany, WA.
Hello.
Hey, Maria, how are you?
Yeah, good. It's Albany, actually.
Albany. Can you tell I've never been to WA?
Mount Barker's 50 kilometres away.
Exactly. It's just down the road from Mount Barker.
Yep.
So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I need to come across there.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. It's beautiful. One thing I'd like to say is I find it quite interesting that when people sort of draw pictures of what they've seen, their faces are mostly elongated of the aliens. And is it possible they could be demons?
Yes, it is. What I would call them is actually fallen angels, mainly. Mm-hmm. But here's the interesting thing. The classic aliens that are, pictured now, what they call the greys, spindly little creatures with oversized heads and bug eyes, they only started to appear like that in the late 70s and the 80s. And this phenomenon manifests itself towards the cultural understanding of the day. So here we are, we're talking about UFOs and the idea of advanced spaceships, but 120 years before, no one ever had those types of experiences or saw those things. So, for example, the American Indians said they saw flying canoes with occupants on board. Alexander the Great has stories of flying shields that buzzed his army. In the late 1800s, there was the airship wave in the United States, and they didn't have airships or blimps or balloons then, but they were just experimenting with them in Europe. So you can imagine, appearing as a faster-than-light spaceship to American Indians, or possibly we're going to hear maybe Australian Aboriginals, it would not be understood. So the common picture that people draw now is actually mirroring science fiction. And it was Steven Spielberg in his movie Close Encounters of the Third Time when the giant flying saucer landed and they came out. That was the first time we saw those spindly, bug-eyed creatures. That's how he depicted them. I remember as a kid going, oh, wow, I've never seen anything like that. But after that, that's how they appear. And in fact, other ones appear as reptilian, as insectoid. I mean, researchers, and I'm not exaggerating here, John Keel, a famous UFO writer, said that serious researchers have sometimes gone off the deep end trying to fathom it out because of the strangeness of it all.
So you think it could be fallen angels that can manifest?
Yeah, we're going to. Yeah, we're going to get a little bit deeper into that because the only area we can unpick what's happening. I can't lasso a UFO in a sky or bring it in with my tractor beam to do empirical scientific experiments. So then you've got to look at these people that have encounters, and they're told things and they're told stories. Well, here's a bit of a heads up. We have over 400 cases today, okay, of people who claimed that they'd originally had experiences with aliens. That's what they thought. And in their moment of terror, they called out on the name of Jesus Christ and the experience halted. So what does that tell you about the spiritual nature of these manifestations?
Exactly.
Get the book. It'll all be revealed to you.
I have got the book actually, but I'm in WA and I've got my belongings in Tasmania, so the book's actually over there. So I'll have to get another copy.
No worries.
Well, Maria from Albany, WA, I want to thank you for calling today and also teaching me how to pronounce Albany correctly as well.
All good. God bless you both.
Yeah, God bless you as well. Now, I think we have Tara again, so let's try and get Tara on the line again. And Tara, sorry you got cut off before, but what's your comment or question today?
Yeah, sorry, just to see what your thoughts are around the Australian Aboriginal, like the Dreamtime stories, around the artwork that look alien-like in the Kimberleys. Then we have our stories of the mountains and hills. And the religious beliefs. Yeah,
well, I'm not sure how I should comment on, obviously, Australian Aboriginal beliefs, but obviously where they conflict with the creation story and any biblical story. As an evangelical Christian, I wouldn't subscribe to them. But I don't know if you heard the previous comment, Tara, because Indigenous peoples all over the world have had what we might call UFO encounters. I mentioned that American Indians, for example, have seen flying canoes with occupants on board, and the Greeks and the Romans even have objects in the sky with people on board. Now, this is before, obviously, any manned flight could have taken place. So what we call UFOs, in terms of the, alien craft, is something that's quite unique to our Western culture. But all over the world, as I said, Indigenous groups have had experiences with seeing things in the sky and also personal encounters. I've done missions work in Southeast Asia, and you'll often find in a lot of these animist cultures and so on, they put out offerings, and they even talk about visitors and beings coming in the night, and they all have different names for their experiences. In the same way, people today in Western cultures, they claim that they see spirits of the dead, their deceased relatives. Well, the Bible is pretty clear that when you die, you go to one or two places. And, even my own father had this experience claiming that he saw his deceased father at the foot of his bed. Now, I was the first Christian in my family, and I've been fortunate enough to see, my parents saved and all my extended family. And when we sat and discussed this, he started to realize, even as seemingly comforting that may have been to him, seeing his deceased father at the foot of his bed, he came to realize it was a deception. We always think that deceptions will somehow manifest themselves as being evil or ugly, but they're not. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. They were deceived by Lucifer, and Lucifer means being of light or bearer of light, light being synonymous with everything that is good about God. So they were deceived into thinking about something that was nice and comforting, but it was not true. Now, could some of those Dreamtime stories or legends be visits of supernatural beings? I have absolutely no idea, and I've got to be honest, I'm not qualified to comment on that, but I will say that in my experience with particularly a lot of third world cultures, that they have recorded experiences with supernatural beings. And also, I'm a student of ancient Egypt. It's one of my areas of study and expertise. You know, we read in the Bible about the magicians and the sorcerers. Well, in reading Egyptian writings, they really believed this stuff had power and it was doing things, and we shouldn't be surprised about that.
Yep.
Well, what a great question, Tara. We've got so many other people trying to get through on the line today, but really good question, Tara. You're definitely in the running to winning a free copy of this book today, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. And hey, don't wait to win it. Buy yourself a copy. Go to Amazon or just Google it online, and you can find it there. But Tara, I want to thank you for calling us from Mount Barker, WA today.
Thank you.
And Gary, we'll go to another caller straight away, and we have Philip calling from Brisbane in Queensland. Are you there, Philip?
Yes, I'm here.
Go for it, Philip. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what I believe in, that it is in the spiritual realm. I'm a Christian myself. I've been a Christian all my life. And I've never known any Christians to have been abducted because we are protected by the blood of Jesus. And I believe that what says in the Bible, there's going to be a great deception in the end times. And I believe this may be one of the deceptions that the devil will use to deceive even Christians. So I don't discount, all the people that have seen UFOs or I don't want to belittle that. I've never seen one myself, but I believe, yes, it is part of the spiritual realm.
Philip, that's a really good comment. You sound like you're halfway to being abducted yourself there. Are you in a wind tunnel or something? I don't know. But what you said's actually really, I thought, some really good points there, Gary, that number one, this is part of the end times deception, which it definitely is, because it is distracting people away from Jesus, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of end times, but it's been a constant deception. And let's say that it could form part of our end times scenarios, but every generation of Christian has always thought they're in the end times, you're right. But yes, he made a comment there that he believes that Christians are generally exempt. And that was something that we discovered when we were researching this. The two researchers based in Florida who work for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, they said it's so strange, like I mentioned before, they said instead of looking at people who have been abducted, is there any significant portion of the population who have not been abducted? And then they looked at some of their investigations, and they had these encounters where people said, I called on the name of Jesus and it stopped. So they thought, well, Christians. And they rang their colleagues in MUFON. This is what's surprising, Andrew. This is the information that literally has been covered up. They rang their colleagues in MUFON, and they said, yeah, we know about that. So aliens don't like Christians, big deal. And they said, no, we think we're onto something. So they took themselves off to a new Christians class in a Bible study group. These guys were not Christians, and they found out, yes, the Bible talks about a spiritual realm. There's always been a battle between, should we simply put the forces of good and evil that are in supernatural form. And so they also they discovered there were two types of Christians. This is interesting. They said there were these talk the talk Christians, and they were not exempt from the experiences, but then they said there was this distinct group they called the walk Christians. And these were people, they said, that were believers in the Bible as God's revealed word. They tried to follow Christ's example, live their lives as model Christians. And generally, these were exempt. Now, it's wrong to say that no Christian, because some of these Christians have, for want of a better term, had an issue in their life, backslid. I remember one lady I interviewed, she said, I went to a party and they messed around with tarot cards one night and we all thought it was a bit of fun. She said, I didn't take it seriously, but I realized the devil did. And then she had one of these encounters and realized that what she'd done is open the door. So yes, I mean, at the end of the day, can you imagine if a little grey alien stood at the bottom of your bed, Andrew, or my bed in the middle of the night and said, hey, I'm from the planet Zook. I've come here to help you. You know, for people who've not been in a church, don't know Jesus, we need to have empathy. That's a life-changing experience.
Absolutely.
But for you and I, we know where that comes from straight away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not going to bother with us.
Yeah, so Philip from Brisbane, I don't know if you're still there or not, but thank you for your call. We can't hear very clearly, mate. Are you on speaker or something on Bluetooth? You raised some really, really good points there, mate, and you're definitely in the running for winning a copy of the book. And we've had some great calls, so I want to thank everyone who has called us. We've got one more we're going to get through, and it is Chris from Melbourne, Victoria. Chris, are you there?
You there, Andrew?
Yes, Chris. You got a question or a comment for us today?
Just mainly a comment. It is all about deception, the aliens, UFOs. We know that the aliens, when they manifest their demons, and it's all to explain the rapture. You know, when the people disappear, how else are they going to explain it that UFOs remove the people? You know what I mean? It's like when they first introduced Star Trek, beam me up, Scotty. Isn't that the rapture, you know, in the devil's terms? Beam me up, Scotty.
So it's like a fake rapture. And, mate, unfortunately, Chris, you also sound like you're halfway to being abducted as well. It's a pretty bad line there. But I want to thank you so much for calling in today, Chris. It's a really bad line. I don't know if you heard the comment there, Gary. You got a response for Chris?
Yeah, well, again, I think we've got to be a little careful. I mean, look, I subscribe to that particular view of eschatology, so I'm not trying to debunk that. That's my personal view. The ministry that I work for doesn't get into end times. It's not part of what we do. But here's the thing. If people read my book, and I'm not just trying to plug the book, it will have all the information in there. And by the way, I've signed those copies today if people get those, so they can get a signed copy.
And by the way, I'm trying to promote the book because it's a great book. It's called Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection.
Yeah.
Google it, search it up, get yourself a copy. They made a movie about this book, and the movie was massive, won all sorts of awards. We haven't got time to talk about that. It's well worth a search. There you go, Gary.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, it's on creation.com, so you can get it there, book and movie. But, so when we talk about end time, as I said, if this deception has been with us forever, I think in terms of the bigger picture, yes, it could be used in an end time scenario, but the bigger picture is it is used to take people's eyes away from the Lord. Because when I spoke about those three big questions before, right, I'm absolutely certain here the Bible does not subscribe to alien life, as in, what we see in science fiction. When Adam and Eve fell, okay, it spoiled the universe. The heavens and earth that were created are now subject to decay. So if God had created Vulcans, poor old Mr. Spock sitting out there on Vulcans, and they get diseases, cancers, and die. Why? Because of what Adam did. Totally unfair to do that to sentient beings who have no hope of salvation because Christ died once for all. He's not going to be crucified and raised again on other planets. And I could talk more about this, and people can go to creation.com and look up, did God create life on other planets? And I've got a comprehensive article from a biblical first point of view. So even as big as the universe is, people say, well, why did God create the universe so big for us? Well, it's big to us. Is it big for God if he created it? Because when you and I say something is big, if I said, well, Andrew, I want to travel to the edge of the Milky Way. It's 100,000 light years away. Okay, so we look at the distance and then how long it takes us to get there traveling at a certain speed. But is God already there? So it didn't take him any time to get there. So it doesn't take him any time to build a big universe or a small one. And the Bible tells us multiple times over why God created the universe the way he did. Okay? It's to glorify him. The heavens declare the glory of God. And here's what happens, and the reason I mention all that is people today, they see something, they're affected by the experience, they look up and they go, I wonder what else is out there. What they should do is look up and go, my God. The psalmist says, what is man that you are mindful of him? And here's the pertinent point. That incredibly powerful God that made all of that, he came to this lowly planet as a human being when we messed it up so that we can be reconciled back to him. And this deception we're talking about is just one of many deceptions in the world today. False religions, supernatural experiences designed to keep our eyes away from the one true source.
Wow. So well put, Gary. Gary, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to select the winners of the book today. And just to recap, today's been a great conversation. We've learned that 4 million Americans claim to have been abducted by aliens. God bless them. We've also learned that this is a big deception because it seems to take people's eyes away from the Lord. We've also learnt that Christians, full-on Christians, don't seem to get abducted by aliens, nor do they have these encounters with aliens. But we've also learnt that historically this is nothing new, that even in ancient times, people have had encounters with other beings. In fact, I think it was Pompey, the Roman general who was fighting that civil war against Julius Caesar. I think he claimed to have been in his tent one night and a spirit being or something came into his tent to intimidate him, and he shouted at it and told it to leave, and it did. I mean, that could have been defined as an alien encounter by him if he'd known what an alien was.
Yeah. And look, let me just say something, because I mean, somebody sort of said there, he doesn't demean people's experiences and sightings. As Christians, and particularly as a creationist, I found I had to moderate myself early on because, we've got lots of information that people don't know. But when people come up to me on this subject, and they do, and they're seeking answers, seeking closure, don't be quick to tell them, oh, it's demonic, because they've had a real experience. And if you just do that straight away, they'll just turn around and go to one of these UFO research centers where there's other people like them, and they'll get embraced and they're welcomed in. There's 3 things I tell people that they need to do. They need to listen, they need to listen, and they need to listen. By listening and saying, listen, I think you had an experience, you're not validating it or agreeing with the nature of the experience. And so I found you let people talk out. The most surprising thing to me working with a scientific organization is people come up to me at the end and they say, Gary, it was just like you said. And that created a bond of empathy that I could then sit with them and share with them about the Lord.
Brilliant. Lovely, lovely, lovely. We do need to finish up now, Gary. So who are the lucky winners of the book today?
I was going to say Tara, but we can't call her back.
Tara, you won the book. You got the gold medal, but we won't call you back because you're calling on a silent number. So who's number 2 or 3 on your list?
Okay,
then?
Well, I think Trevor, talking about his mate who'd seen this, who was troubled, because that really resonates with me from meeting people. And I think Philip in Brisbane, who was sharing with us about that he thought that it was demonic and that Christians had been exempt. I thought that was the most insightful.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, I want to thank all the callers for calling in, and we will get in touch with those 2 lucky callers who've won a copy of the book. But Gary Bates from Creation Ministries, I want to thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. And just a reminder, if you want to get your hands on a copy of this book, it's called Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. But Gary, thank you so much for a great conversation on 2020 Today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.